Have you ever felt like the universe was trying to send you a message through something as simple as numbers? Perhaps you keep encountering the same house number, a familiar sequence appears on receipts, or you notice repeated digits like 1111 on your phone. At first it might seem like an odd coincidence. But what if it's not? What if these recurring numbers are deliberate signs, quiet whispers from the universe guiding you toward clarity and purpose? Numbers have always been more than mere tools for counting. Across centuries, they've been revered as carriers of spiritual energy and cosmic meaning. In Buddhism, they illuminate paths to enlightenment. In feng shui, they balance energy. In numerology, they unlock the secrets of destiny. Even astrology embraces their resonance, transforming abstract symbols into deeply personal insights. For a Capricorn, for instance, these signs might feel like a grounding force, a reminder to trust the flow of life's timing. But the beauty of numbers lies in their universality. They transcend belief systems, zodiac signs, and personal philosophies. Numbers speak a language anyone can hear, offering guidance and meaning to those ready to notice them. This isn't about superstition or mysticism. It's about perspective. Numbers often appear in our most critical moments, revealing patterns and bringing clarity. When we recognize these signs as more than random occurrences, life begins to feel less chaotic and more interconnected. The seemingly random puzzle pieces of life start to fall into place. Today we'll explore 6 extraordinary numbers, each carrying its own unique and transformative message. These numbers aren't just figures, they're cosmic guides, ready to help you navigate challenges, embrace opportunities, and align with the perfect timing of your journey. So take a deep breath, open your mind, and let's embark on this fascinating journey of discovery. Sometimes the answers we're searching for are already there, hidden in plain sight. Have you ever experienced moments where numbers seem to follow you as if they're telling a story? Imagine seeing 555 on a passing truck, then glancing at your phone at 2:22, only to find your receipt total reads 888. These are not random coincidences. They feel like a narrative unfolding, one that's both deeply personal and universally profound. Numbers, beyond their mathematical origins, have always been seen as bridges between the tangible and the transcendent. In ancient cultures, they were thought to carry vibrational energy that could align us with life's higher purpose. In Buddhism, they symbolize enlightenment. In feng shui, they harmonize energy. Modern numerology and astrology reveal numbers as dynamic tools for personal transformation. For many, these patterns resonate as magnetic signs, particularly for introspective individuals like Capricorns. For a Capricorn, spotting the same number repeatedly might feel like a reminder to trust their instincts and embrace life's timing. But these signs are not confined to anyone's zodiac or belief. Their language is universal, open to anyone willing to see and listen. Picture this. You're navigating a period of doubt or change. Suddenly, the number 777 appears repeatedly on license plates, notifications, and receipts. This isn't a chance. It's an invitation to trust your inner wisdom and surrender to the unknown. Numbers like 1111 often emerge in moments of emotional turbulence, gently guiding you toward balance. Or you might encounter 33, a signal to nurture your relationships and let your creativity shine. Numbers are not mere coincidences. They are guides offering clarity and direction. Each number carries a specific energy, reflecting the emotions and circumstances you're experiencing. They're there for a reason, encouraging you to align with the flow of the universe and recognize the interconnectedness of life. this journey isn't about random patterns or mystical thinking. It's about tuning into the rhythms around us and understanding the messages they hold. When we notice these signs, we step into a state of awareness where opportunities emerge and uncertainty transforms into clarity. In the coming chapters, we'll unravel the profound meanings of 6 powerful numbers. These are not random digits. They're intentional markers placed along your path to help you navigate, grow, and thrive. Their presence in your life isn't accidental. It's purposeful, waiting for you to embrace their guidance. Now, let's take a moment to set an intention. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and affirm, I am ready to see the signs, receive their wisdom, and align with my true purpose. With this mindset, let's dive deeper into the mystery of these cosmic guides. Together we'll uncover how these numbers can enrich your journey, offering synchronicity, transformation, and a sense of deeper connection. This isn't just about numbers. It's about stepping into a life of intention and meaning. Are you ready to discover what they have to tell you? Let's begin.
Number 23, the energy of adaptability and joy. The number 23 radiates a vibrant energy that beautifully balances adaptability and joy. It invites us to approach life's unpredictability with curiosity and optimism, encouraging us to see change not as a disruption but as an opportunity for growth. This energy reminds us that stepping outside our comfort zones often leads to the most fulfilling discoveries, as long as we remain anchored to our core values. In numerology, 23 blends the harmonious qualities of the numbers 2 and 3. The number 2 symbolizes balance, harmony, and meaningful partnerships, offering a grounding energy that fosters cooperation and connection. Meanwhile, the number 3 embodies creativity, self-expression, and a sense of adventure, inspiring us to pursue our passions and share our unique gifts with the world. Together, they create a dynamic synergy that encourages exploration while maintaining stability, making 23 a guiding force for those seeking personal and spiritual growth. From a spiritual perspective, 23 carries significance across diverse traditions. In Eastern philosophies like feng shui, it represents the balance of yin and yang, an invitation to create environments that are both grounding and inspiring, nurturing inner peace while sparking creativity. In Western numerology, 23 is viewed as a bridge between the physical and spiritual, reminding us to align our practical efforts with our higher purpose. Similarly, Buddhist philosophy mirrors the themes of adaptability and joy, encouraging mindfulness and an openness to life's endless possibilities. For Capricorns, who often lean toward structure and discipline, the energy of 23 offers a gentle challenge. It asks them to trust in the unfolding journey, let go of rigidity, and make room for spontaneity and creative expression. By doing so, they can unlock a deeper sense of fulfillment, blending the security of structure with the excitement of discovery. The energy of 23 isn't just theoretical, it can transform our daily lives in meaningful ways. Cultivating curiosity is one way to embrace its power. This could mean exploring new hobbies, trying unfamiliar experiences, or simply breaking away from routine to ignite fresh perspectives. Balancing structure with spontaneity is another key aspect. While routines provide stability, leaving room for unplanned moments can infuse life with unexpected joy. Meaningful connections are also central to 23's energy. By nurturing relationships and expressing ourselves authentically, we deepen bonds and foster trust. Even our environments can reflect this balance. Applying feng shui principles like combining vibrant, Creative elements with calming, grounding features can create spaces that inspire and energize us. Finally, when faced with change, adopting a mindset of openness can turn uncertainty into an opportunity for growth, transforming fear into excitement. At its core, the energy of 23 reminds us that life is a dance between stability and discovery. By embracing the unknown and trusting in our ability to adapt, we open ourselves to endless opportunities for growth, creativity, and connection. Its message is clear: joy and adaptability are just as vital as structure and discipline in leading a fulfilling life. An affirmation for the energy of 23 is simple yet profound. I welcome change and find joy in every new experience. I trust my ability to adapt and embrace life with curiosity and balance. For Capricorns and others alike, embodying the energy of 23 means living with the freedom to explore, the courage to create, and the wisdom to remain grounded. It is an invitation to inspire not just ourselves but those around us, cultivating lives of openness, passion, and purpose. This is the gift of 23, a reminder to live boldly, adapt gracefully, and find joy in the journey. Number 7, the path to wisdom and introspection. The number 7 stands as a guiding light for those seeking clarity, urging us to journey inward and reconnect with the truths that reside within. Its energy is both profound and understated, encouraging stillness and reflection amid life's noise. Representing introspection, spiritual insight, and the pursuit of deeper understanding, 7 resonates with philosophers, dreamers, and seekers alike. It serves as a reminder that beneath life's complexities lies a reservoir of wisdom waiting to be uncovered. For Capricorns, who naturally excel in reflective spaces, the energy of 7 feels like a trusted companion. Capricorns are known for their thoughtful approach to life, finding meaning even in the smallest details. The influence of 7 amplifies this innate connection, gently nudging them to trust their instincts and face challenges with calm and clarity. It's an invitation to explore not just the outer world but also the vast universe within. The spiritual significance of 7 bridges the tangible and the transcendent. In Eastern traditions, it embodies principles of mindfulness and balance. Buddhist teachings emphasize present moment awareness, a practice that aligns beautifully with the introspective journey of 7. Feng Shui associates the number with the metal element, symbolizing clarity, focus, and reflection. Together, these perspectives reveal how 7's energy encourages alignment, grounding us in both the visible and the invisible. From a Western perspective, 7 is linked to spiritual awakening and self-discovery. It challenges us to question what we know, remain open to new insights, and deepen our understanding of life's mysteries. For Capricorns, whose resilience and discipline often define them, this energy becomes a powerful tool for making intentional, thoughtful decisions. When life feels overwhelming, 7 offers a refuge of stillness, a place to reflect, regroup, and find balance. Yet, the energy of 7 is not about introspection for its own sake. It's about applying the wisdom gained to daily life. Simple practices like morning meditation create space for clarity, allowing thoughts to settle and patterns to emerge. A few quiet moments each day can unveil solutions and insights that might otherwise go unnoticed. Journaling is another transformative practice, whether to capture fleeting ideas, process emotions, or organize thoughts. It fosters a deeper connection to self. The influence of 7 extends to our physical spaces as well. Creating an environment that encourages reflection can be deeply transformative. Soft lighting, natural materials, and minimalist design elements invite simplicity and calm, mirroring the spiritual act of decluttering the mind. For Capricorns, who often juggle multiple responsibilities, these spaces can provide grounding and balance, offering a much-needed sanctuary amid life's demands. The essence of 7 reminds us that wisdom isn't found in rushing or seeking answers outside ourselves. It's cultivated in moments of stillness and quiet reflection. For Capricorns, this energy encourages a trust in their inner voice, a guiding compass that can navigate challenges with grace and resilience. Tuning into the energy of 7 deepens self-awareness and enhances the ability to connect meaningfully with others. Reflect on this affirmation. I seek wisdom within and embrace the journey of self-discovery. The number 7 teaches that the answers we seek are often already present within us, waiting to be uncovered through patience and introspection. By slowing down, observing, and reflecting, we unlock profound insights that illuminate not only our personal path but also bring a sense of peace and purpose to our lives. This is not just a spiritual ideal, it's a practical guide for approaching life with confidence and clarity. Embrace the energy of 7 as a reminder that the journey inward is one of life's most rewarding adventures. It is an invitation to trust yourself, honor your inner wisdom, and find joy in the profound simplicity of reflection and self-discovery. Number 10, the power of new beginnings and leadership. The number 10 radiates a potent energy that intertwines the power of leadership with the promise of new beginnings. It holds a dual message, reminding us to boldly initiate ventures while honoring the cyclical nature of life. In this cycle, every ending becomes the fertile ground for a fresh start. The energy of 10 is an invitation to create, transform, and redefine our journeys through vision and purposeful action. At its essence, 10 is a harmonious union of 2 powerful forces, the assertive individuality of 1 and the infinite potential of 0. The number 1 symbolizes confidence, courage, and the drive to lead, while 0 magnifies this energy, representing endless possibilities and boundless potential. Together, they create a dynamic vibration that encourages us to embrace our power, lead with clarity, and trust in life's cycles of growth and renewal. For Capricorns, the number 10 resonates deeply, aligning with their natural discipline and ambition. Capricorns, known for their ability to turn visions into reality, find reassurance in 10's structured yet expansive energy. This number speaks to their inherent strength as leaders, encouraging them to act with clarity and determination. It urges them to step into their roles as changemakers, embracing transformation as an essential element of success. Spiritually, 10 holds profound significance across cultures. In numerology, it marks the completion of one cycle and the start of another, mirroring the Buddhist principle of impermanence. This perspective teaches us to view change not as a disruption but as a catalyst for growth and renewal. In feng shui, 10 symbolizes harmony and flow, encouraging environments that promote clarity, focus, and the ability to adapt, qualities vital for effective leadership and the embrace of fresh starts. On a practical level, the energy of 10 can profoundly shape how we navigate life. It begins with a shift in mindset, seeing challenges and endings as stepping stones toward evolution. For Capricorns, this might mean taking bold steps into new opportunities. Whether launching a long-held project, exploring a new career path, or revitalizing relationships with fresh energy and perspective. The number 10 acts as a supportive guide, urging them to trust in their capabilities and take decisive action, even when the road ahead feels uncertain. The energy of 10 also extends to the spaces we create around us. Surrounding yourself with symbols of growth, such as plants, natural light, or art that resonates with personal meaning, can inspire renewal and focus. For Capricorns, who thrive in environments that blend structure with inspiration, creating organized and intentional spaces can amplify the grounded yet limitless energy of 10. Such environments provide the clarity and confidence needed to pursue goals with purpose. Above all, 10 is a call to embrace leadership in every aspect of life. Whether in professional endeavors, personal relationships, or inner growth. This number reminds us of our power to shape our destinies. For Capricorns, it reaffirms their natural ability to turn visions into reality and lead with determination and grace. It encourages them to trust the process, welcome change, and step forward with faith in their journeys unfolding. Reflecting on the energy of 10, consider this affirmation: I embrace new beginnings and lead with confidence and purpose. The wisdom of 10 inspires us to view endings as doorways to infinite possibilities. It teaches us that true leadership begins within, by taking charge of our own lives with clarity, courage, and intention. For those ready to listen, the number 10 offers not only the promise of success but also the tools to achieve it. It invites us to be both architects and adventurers, stepping into new beginnings with vision, strength, and an unshakable belief in our potential. Number 28, the synergy of ambition and harmony. The number 28 carries a unique and potent energy that harmonizes ambition with connection. It represents a path where personal success and meaningful relationships thrive together. By blending the cooperative essence of 2 with the grounded resilience of 8, 28 creates a dynamic force that urges us to pursue our dreams with purpose while remaining rooted in the strength of our connections. It is a reminder that success is most fulfilling when shared and balanced. For Capricorns, the energy of 28 resonates deeply. Known for their unwavering drive and structured approach to life, Capricorns often focus on scaling the heights of their ambitions. Yet, the number 28 gently reminds them that true success is not just about reaching the peak, it's also about the relationships and shared moments that enrich the journey. It encourages them to nurture the connections that sustain and support them, emphasizing the importance of balance between personal milestones and shared experiences. Spiritually, 28 conveys a universal message of equilibrium. In numerology, it symbolizes the interplay between leadership and connection. The energy of 2 highlights unity and collaboration, reminding us of the strength found in partnerships. Meanwhile, the number 8 reflects abundance, strength, and the discipline needed to turn visions into reality. This combination is echoed in Eastern philosophies like Feng Shui, where 28 symbolizes the harmonious flow of prosperity when ambition aligns with meaningful relationships. Buddhist teachings on interdependence further mirror this idea, underscoring that true fulfillment arises from harmony between self and others. In practical terms, the energy of 28 serves as a guide for balancing ambition with connection in daily life. It begins with cultivating awareness of how your energy is distributed. For Capricorns, who often channel intense focus into their goals, this number invites a thoughtful reassessment of priorities. It's a call to ensure that while they aim high, they also make space for moments of connection and shared joy. Achieving this balance doesn't diminish their ambitions, it enhances their ability to sustain them. Collaboration is another key aspect of 28's energy. Success rarely occurs in isolation, and this number highlights the power of shared efforts. Whether through professional partnerships, mentorship, or personal relationships, collaboration amplifies success and deepens bonds. Capricorns, with their natural ability to lead, can draw upon this energy to build environments where teamwork flourishes, blending their own determination with the support of others. The influence of 28 also extends to the spaces we inhabit. A harmonious environment, designed with balance in mind, can reinforce the dual energy of ambition and connection. Incorporating feng shui principles, such as grounding elements like wood or stone alongside soft, inviting features like warm lighting, creates a physical reflection of the balance 28 embodies. For Capricorns, this alignment offers a tangible way to channel their energy into a lifestyle that supports both productivity and connection. Ultimately, the number 28 is a powerful reminder that success is most meaningful when shared. For Capricorns, it affirms that their natural drive and discipline are enhanced, not hindered, by fostering relationships. By integrating connection into their pursuits, they create a life that is both abundant and deeply satisfying. Consider this affirmation: I balance ambition with connection, creating a harmonious life. The energy of 28 teaches us that life's greatest achievements are those built on a foundation of balance. It calls us to honor our ambitions while cherishing the bonds that give those achievements meaning. For Capricorns, the message is especially profound: success becomes richer when shared, and goals become more fulfilling when achieved in harmony with those who matter most. The number 28 is a guide, reminding us all that how we achieve our dreams and who we share them with defines the true essence of success. Number 14, the harmony of balance and freedom. The number 14 carries an energy that seamlessly blends stability with exploration, embodying the delicate art of balancing rootedness and the freedom to grow. It reminds us that true security is not found in rigidity but in adaptability, the ability to remain grounded while embracing the excitement of the unknown. The energy of 14 serves as a guide, teaching us that life's most profound growth often comes when we trust our resilience and allow stability and freedom to coexist harmoniously. For Capricorns, this energy resonates deeply. Known for their love of structure and meticulous planning, Capricorns are naturally inclined to build strong foundations. However, the number 14 gently challenges them to venture beyond their established boundaries, encouraging them to embrace new experiences with confidence. It reassures them that exploring uncharted territories doesn't mean sacrificing the stability they hold dear. Instead, it highlights the possibility of expanding their horizons while staying true to their core values. From a spiritual perspective, the number 14 delivers a universal message of equilibrium. In numerology, it combines the leadership and individuality of 1 with the practical discipline and stability of 4. This fusion creates a synergy that fosters ambition and security, urging us to pursue growth while remaining grounded. Eastern philosophies, such as feng shui, echo this sentiment by emphasizing balance as a cornerstone of harmonious living. The energy of 14 invites us to create environments that reflect this principle, spaces where stability and creativity exist in perfect harmony, inspiring growth without chaos. Buddhist teachings also mirror the essence of 14 through the middle way, which advocates avoiding extremes and finding peace in moderation. This principle aligns beautifully with the energy of 14, urging us to approach life with a grounded openness. It's a reminder that freedom isn't about discarding stability but about integrating it into a broader journey of exploration and self-discovery. In practical terms, The energy of 14 offers valuable guidance for navigating life's complexities. It calls us to build strong foundations in relationships, careers, and personal well-being while staying open to opportunities for transformation. For Capricorns, this might mean incorporating spontaneity into their structured lives, trusting that their innate discipline will guide them through the unfamiliar. It encourages them to embrace change, knowing that stability is not compromised by exploration but rather enriched by it. This balance also extends to the physical spaces we inhabit. Designing environments that nurture both grounding and inspiration can amplify the energy of 14. For instance, incorporating natural materials like wood and stone can provide stability, while open, light-filled spaces foster creativity and curiosity. These balanced surroundings reflect the duality of the number 14, creating a sense of harmony that supports both comfort and exploration. On a deeper level, 14 teaches us the importance of adaptability. Life's journey is rarely linear, and this number reminds us to move with its natural ebb and flow, trusting in our ability to adjust and thrive. For Capricorns, who often focus intensely on long-term plans, 14 serves as a gentle reminder to remain flexible and open to change. By stepping into the unknown with confidence, they not only discover new opportunities but also strengthen their resilience, affirming their ability to navigate challenges with grace. Reflecting on the energy of 14, consider this affirmation: I create balance and embrace freedom in all areas of my life. Ultimately, the number 14 reveals that stability and growth are not opposing forces but complementary elements of a fulfilling life. It encourages us to build strong foundations while exploring new horizons, finding freedom that is both liberating and deeply rooted. For Capricorns, this is a powerful invitation to expand their definition of success, integrating their natural discipline with a willingness to embrace change and opportunity. By doing so, they not only achieve their goals but also cultivate a life that feels balanced, authentic, and profoundly rewarding. Number 9, the essence of compassion and completion. The number 9 exudes a powerful energy of compassion and completion, embodying the wisdom of life's cycles and the transformative beauty of endings. It invites us to release what no longer serves us, creating space for renewal and growth, while embracing the role of guiding others with empathy and understanding. As a culmination point, 9 integrates past experiences into a foundation for new beginnings, offering both closure and the promise of transformation. For Capricorns, this energy resonates deeply. Known for their grounded nature and nurturing qualities, Capricorns are naturally aligned with the compassionate wisdom of 9. It amplifies their ability to lead with kindness and intuition, urging them to find strength not just in achieving personal milestones but also in uplifting others. For them, 9 serves as a reminder that endings are not failures but essential steps toward transformation and growth, paving the way for something greater. From a spiritual perspective, the number 9 carries universal significance. In numerology, it is seen as the number of humanitarianism and enlightenment, marking the culmination of a journey where the lessons learned inspire acts of service. It calls for a willingness to guide others toward fulfillment while continuing one's own evolution. Eastern philosophies echo this sentiment. In Buddhism, 9 represents impermanence, reminding us that change is not only inevitable but also a vital force for renewal. Feng Shui aligns 9 with the fire element, symbolizing energy, warmth, and the compassion that strengthens our connections with others. Practically, the energy of 9 challenges us to approach life with openness and a willingness to let go, This can mean releasing old habits, relationships, or mindsets that no longer align with our purpose. For Capricorns, this task may feel daunting, as their structured nature often clings to stability. However, 9 gently reassures them that letting go is not a loss but a step toward clarity and renewal, allowing them to move forward with purpose. This energy also inspires acts of compassionate leadership and service. Capricorns, who naturally excel in guiding and mentoring, can channel the energy of 9 to lead with empathy and inspire others. Whether through teaching, mentoring, or simply offering a listening ear, Capricorns can use their intuitive depth to create meaningful connections and ripple effects of positivity. By doing so, they transform not only their own lives but also the lives of those around them. Incorporating the energy of 9 into daily life can be profoundly empowering. Rituals like journaling or meditating on release and renewal help us reflect on what we're ready to let go of and what we wish to embrace. For Capricorns, creating spaces that foster clarity and purpose through simplicity, warm lighting, and natural elements can further support this transformative journey. These practices ground them in the cycles of life while nurturing their intuitive depth. The number 9 ultimately speaks to the heart of human connection. It reminds us that our lives are intertwined and that the wisdom we gain is meant to be shared. For Capricorns, this energy calls them to lean into their nurturing instincts, trust their intuition, and embrace their role as compassionate leaders. By doing so, they find fulfillment not only in their own growth but also in inspiring others to embrace life's cycles with courage and optimism. Reflect on this affirmation. I embrace compassion and trust the process of completion and renewal. The number 9 teaches us that endings are not to be feared but celebrated as opportunities for transformation. It calls us to trust the process, to lead with empathy, and to approach each moment with wisdom and grace. For Capricorns, this energy bridges their structured nature with their intuitive depth, empowering them to live lives of profound meaning and connection. Through the energy of 9, we are reminded that every ending holds the seed of a new beginning, and in every act of letting go, we find the freedom to grow anew. By embracing this energy, we honor the cycles of life and discover the strength to transform with compassion, grace, and purpose. The journey through these 6 numbers unveils a profound tapestry of energies, each holding a key to self-discovery and transformation. These numbers are not mere coincidences, they are cosmic guides, aligning us with purpose, joy, and balance. They invite us to attune to the universe's rhythm, pause, reflect, and trust in the unfolding of our journey. Each number carries a distinct essence that adds a unique dimension to this narrative of growth. The dynamic creativity of 23 encourages us to approach life with curiosity and exploration, revealing hidden layers of joy in the everyday. The introspective wisdom of 7 draws us inward, reminding us that the clarity we seek is often found within. The bold leadership and infinite potential of 10 inspire us to embrace endings as opportunities for new beginnings, urging us to step confidently into our power. The harmonious synergy of 28 highlights the balance between ambition and connection, teaching us that fulfillment is enriched by the relationships we cultivate. The energy of 14 reminds us that stability and freedom are not opposites but complementary forces, guiding us to build strong foundations while daring to explore uncharted paths. Finally, the compassionate wisdom of 9 illuminates the beauty of completion and renewal, encouraging us to release what no longer serves us and to embrace the transformative power of letting go. Together, these numbers weave a narrative of alignment, growth, and possibility. They illuminate a path where creativity meets introspection. Ambition blends seamlessly with connection, and endings transition into beginnings with grace. Their energies call us to trust life's processes, to embrace its challenges and opportunities, and to find meaning in both stillness and movement. For those who are open to their vibrations, these numbers serve as signposts, gently guiding the way toward authenticity and purpose. They remind us to listen closely to the universe's subtle cues, to pause when reflection is needed, and to move forward with courage and clarity. Whether you are seeking growth, joy, balance, or renewal, these numbers invite you to align with your highest potential and embrace the unfolding of your unique journey. Reflect on this truth: you are exactly where you are meant to be, surrounded and guided by energies that have always been present within and around you. These 6 numbers are more than symbols, they are tools of transformation, offering the wisdom needed to navigate life's complexities with grace and intention. Take their lessons to heart, and let their energies inspire you to craft a life that is vibrant, meaningful, and profoundly your own. As we conclude this journey through the profound energies of numbers, take a moment to pause and reflect on the insights and connections you've gained. Numbers, as we've discovered, are much more than symbols, they are guides, aligning us with the universe's rhythm of balance, abundance, and transformation. By embracing their messages, we unlock the pathways to growth, connection, and infinite possibilities. Ground yourself with this affirmation: I open my heart to infinite possibilities and align with the universe's flow of balance and abundance. Let this be your anchor as you continue exploring the unique vibrations these numbers bring into your life. By doing so, you not only enrich your personal journey but contribute to a ripple effect of positivity, inspiring others who are ready to embrace their own power and potential. Which number resonated most with you? Was it the creative curiosity of 23, the introspective wisdom of 7, or perhaps the compassionate guidance of 9? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections could be the spark that inspires someone else to embark on their own path of discovery. Let's build a conversation filled with shared understanding, growth, and insights. If you found meaning in this video, show your support by liking it. It helps share this cosmic wisdom with others who are seeking clarity and connection. Don't forget to subscribe to Fortune Flow, our growing community of explorers. With every like, comment, and subscription, you're helping us bring more empowering and inspiring content to life. Together, we can uncover even more of life's mysteries and create a collective journey toward abundance and peace. The universe speaks to those who listen. By engaging with this content through your comments, likes, and subscriptions, you're becoming part of a larger movement, one that transcends the individual. Your participation amplifies the energy of growth and discovery, not just for yourself but for the entire community. Let this moment be your first step toward aligning with the wisdom and potential that the universe is offering you. As we close, remember that this is only the beginning. Numbers are not just abstract ideas, they are tools for transformation, offering clarity and guidance as we navigate life's challenges and opportunities. By understanding and aligning with their energy, we open the doors to balance, success, and inner peace. Thank you for being part of this exploration. Your presence here signifies your openness to growth, transformation, and infinite potential, a powerful step forward on your journey. Before you go, I want to send positive energy your way. May your path be filled with clarity, abundance, and the courage to embrace all that lies ahead. Remember, this is just the start of what we'll uncover together. Stay tuned for even more insights in upcoming videos. Thank you for trusting Fortune Flow as your guide on this transformative journey. Until next time, keep shining your light brightly and embracing the limitless possibilities the universe holds for you. See you soon!